The monsters are still out there.
Industry was a clear, easy target for Jeffrey Epstein.
He was a brilliant manipulator.
Well, I don't have any massage experience. She said it doesn't matter, he just likes young, pretty girls.
Heinous crime on an absolutely massive scale.
And I just felt so dirty and so, like a piece of me had been taken. Dirty, I felt. It was like my dirty little secret.
Investigators uncovered documents, hidden properties, and a network of powerful names that point toward Jeffrey Epstein and the dark secrets behind his empire. Before anyone understands the depth of it, the trail reveals years of money, influence, and crimes hidden in plain sight. The island you weren't supposed to see.
When you first met Jeffrey Epstein, what were your impressions of him?
Real smart guy. Unbelievably focused.
Little St. James floats in the Atlantic like a secret etched into the map, a private world hidden behind high fences, armed guards, and the illusion of paradise. Aerial shots reveal manicured lawns, luxurious villas, a helipad, and tennis courts that see no crowds. A playground for someone untouchable. Boats pass quietly, helicopters arrive without fanfare, and the silence is deliberate. Here, the billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein crafted not just wealth, but a network of influence that operated out of public sight. Locals spoke in whispers. Tourists never suspected the power at play.
She led me up a staircase, and we made a right into Jeffrey's room, and Jeffrey laying naked on the massage table.
Every detail on the island was curated, designed to impress guests yet shield its darker purpose. Epstein's life was a study in contradictions. A man publicly invisible yet socially omnipresent, moving among presidents, royals, and billionaires. His empire was built on secrecy, persuasion, and the exploitation of trust. Yet for all of its opulence, the island would eventually become the symbol of Epstein's true legacy, a hidden world the public would only glimpse after everything unraveled. But to understand this island, we must trace the beginning. The unknown math teacher with big ambitions.
Know what this thing was, and I want to know why people don't investigate it. I want to know why nobody asks for the filings.
Jeffrey Epstein was born in Brooklyn, 1953, the son of a city gardener and a school aide. Described as a quiet, smart, and unassuming, he excelled in math, graduating high school 2 years early before attending Cooper Union and later NYU, though he never completed a degree. By 1973, he landed a teaching job at the Dalton School in Manhattan, instructing the children of the city's elite. Even in the classroom, Epstein was a study in contradictions, a young man with charm and confidence who dressed provocatively and navigated social circles far beyond his title. His presence drew attention.
Jeffrey Epstein knew a tremendous amount about my work when nobody knew anything about my work. And he had a pipeline into me that I didn't understand, which is that he was connected to my graduate program.
Yet it wasn't his teaching that would define him. Within a few years, a parent impressed by his demeanor recommended him to Alan Greenberg, the CEO of Bear Stearns. Epstein transitioned from classrooms to trading floors, stepping into finance without formal credentials, guided by connections rather than experience. The jump was extraordinary, almost inexplicable, yet it marked the first sign of a pattern. Epstein moving through systems, bypassing conventional barriers, and gaining influence in ways that most would never anticipate. Those early shortcuts hinted at a pattern that would grow. The mysterious rise on Wall Street.
First time we have another branch of government that seemingly thinks that what other branches have to say, well, you know what, that's advisory.
After leaving Dalton School, Epstein stepped into the world of finance with almost no conventional credentials. By 1976, he was at Bear Stearns as an assistant to a floor trader, a position he acquired not through a degree but via a recommendation from a wealthy parent that he had impressed at Dalton. Within 4 years, he climbed to a limited partner, handling significant transactions and gaining access to the inner workings of Wall Street. Documents and employment records show his trajectory was unusually rapid, often bypassing traditional vetting processes. By the early 1980s, Epstein was no longer just part of the firm. He was trusted with private client introductions, managing portfolios for the ultra-wealthy. His role required discretion, but also positioned him as a connector, a figure who could open doors others could only dream of. Maps of his travels from this period reveal flights to financial hubs, meetings with billionaires, and ventures that remain murky in scope. The ascent was astonishing, and yet almost every step appears shielded from scrutiny. But his rise wasn't just fast, it was protected too.
There's been a severe miscarriage of justice, a delay in accountability, and we've all come together beautifully and tragically, which feels healing and devastating all at the same time.
Power, wealth, and the circle around him.
She told me about this man that she worked for. She called him her client.
By the late 1980s, Epstein's influence had multiplied beyond finance. His network spanned CEOs, academics, scientists, and politicians, each drawn by the combination of wealth, discretion, and opportunity that he offered. He flew with them, hosted gatherings in private estates, and quietly curated relationships that placed him at the intersection of power and privilege. Public records show donations to scientific institutions, while private documents reveal advisory roles and introductions that cemented his access. Unlike traditional bankers, Epstein's power didn't come from titles or formal authority, but from being indispensable to those at the top. People sought him out for investment advice, introductions, or access to circles that few could reach. Even as his wealth grew, the method of accrual remained opaque. No public filings, no press on transactions, only whispers and occasional glimpses in social registers. The air of mystery enhanced his magnetism. Within his circle, Epstein became a shadow figure who controlled both perception and opportunity, drawing the world's powerful into a web they would barely understand. And within this circle, something else quietly formed: the recruitment pipeline.
That people that are able to put that kind of evil out into the world should be either locked away forever.
Documents, flight logs, and witness statements suggest a pattern emerging in Epstein's operations. Young women were reportedly directed to specific locations: Manhattan residences, Palm Beach estates, and the isolated island in the Caribbean. Observers noted repeated arrivals and departures, with certain households operating as temporary hubs. Timing and movement followed predictable schedules: afternoons, weekends, holiday breaks, creating a system that blended into ordinary life. Reports indicate some individuals were encouraged to return regularly, often under the pretext of mentorship, career guidance, or educational opportunity. Travel manifests show small groups moving together, sometimes accompanied by adult chaperones connected to Epstein's inner circle. Records also highlight financial transactions tied to these visits: stipends, reimbursements, and gifts that reinforced compliance.
A couple minutes later, and she'd let me out. I couldn't figure out what had just happened. I was so confused. What just happened?
Across years, these patterns formed a network that operated quietly yet consistently, leaving faint trails that only later investigators would piece together. There is no need for sensationalism. The structure is evident in flight data, address registries, and routine movements, a logistical web that mapped out the human network without drawing immediate attention. Patterns that eventually reached a point no one could ignore. The first police reports.
Epstein's victims have talked about how they weren't sure who this guy was, but because Galen seemed so proper, surely it's got to be legit.
The first formal signs of trouble appeared in local law enforcement files in the early 2000s. Complaints came from parents, neighbors, and occasional employees, detailing unusual behavior, late-night visitors, and suspicious patterns around residences. Officers' reports often conflicted. Some noted clear red flags, while others dismissed incidents as minor or unsubstantiated. Initial investigations were slow. Interviews were brief. Case files remained open for months with little action, and subpoenas were delayed. In some instances, files were closed with minimal follow-up, leaving officers frustrated. Records indicate repeated attempts by local investigators to escalate concerns, only to encounter bureaucratic resistance. Even when evidence, flight logs, financial records, and witness statements suggested patterns of exploitation, jurisdictional ambiguities and high-level pressure stalled progress. These early police reports would later serve as the foundation for a larger federal inquiry, but at the time, they existed as scattered warnings, largely unnoticed outside of law enforcement circles. The tension grew quietly, building an undercurrent of unease that went largely unaddressed. But the real shock came when the case reached higher offices. The 2008 deal that made no sense. Court records and federal filings show that Epstein's 2008 plea agreement was unlike any standard prosecution. The non-prosecution agreement granted him immunity from federal charges related to his alleged sex crimes, while also limiting the scope of potential victims included. He served a mere 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges, allowing him to leave for the day. His confinement included access to a private wing, reduced supervision, and minimal reporting requirements. Documents reveal that prosecutors consulted only select law enforcement officials, and victims were reportedly left out of key negotiations. Flight logs, banking records, and attorney communications illustrate the unusual level of discretion afforded to Epstein. The secrecy surrounding the deal meant that even many government officials remained unaware of its full terms. While technically legal, the agreement defied precedent. It shielded a high-profile defendant, compressed punitive measures, and allowed him to resume his network building almost immediately. Public awareness came only years later, sparking outrage and legal scrutiny. And this deal set the stage for his next decade. The empire expands in silence. After 2008, Epstein rebuilt his network with an almost invisible efficiency. Flight logs track his private planes crisscrossing the US, Caribbean, and Europe, often carrying influential figures. Property acquisitions reveal a global footprint: Manhattan townhouses, Palm Beach estates, New Mexico ranches, and his private Caribbean island. Shell companies registered under multiple names show financial flows into investments, security infrastructure, and staff payrolls, creating the appearance of legitimate operations. Employees reportedly numbered in the dozens, handling property management, logistics, and personal travel, each discreetly managed. Offshore accounts and trust structures obscured ownership, making transparency nearly impossible. Public filings, when available, often list generic addresses or corporate names, leaving investigators piecing together fragments. Despite his growing profile among elites, media attention remained sporadic, focused on philanthropy or scientific donations. Yet behind the public facade, the network quietly reinforced itself. Travel, residences, and financial structures all operated with minimal oversight. Every acquisition and movement expanded his reach while maintaining a level of deniability that would later frustrate investigators. But eventually, new voices began to push back. The survivors stepped forward. By the mid-2010s, a group of survivors began speaking publicly, each recounting experiences that spanned years and multiple locations. Their statements were documented through interviews, sworn affidavits, and legal filings, creating a timeline that traced Epstein's activities from the 1990s through the 2000s. Investigators and journalists noted that, despite different backgrounds and locations, the testimonies shared consistent details: specific residences, recurring patterns of travel, and the same network of associates. Many survivors described being offered opportunities or promises that later turned into coercive situations, while others highlighted the systematic grooming and recruitment that had previously gone unreported. Their courage prompted law enforcement to reopen dormant investigations and review sealed files from decades prior. Legal teams compiled corroborating evidence, phone records, flight logs, and photographic documentation that aligned with the survivors' accounts. As more voices emerged, the scale of Epstein's operations became undeniable, turning previously fragmented cases into a coherent narrative of exploitation and cover-up. These testimonies laid the groundwork for accountability that had long been delayed. And when investigators dug deeper, everything shifted. The 2019 arrest. On July 6, 2019, federal agents intercepted Epstein at Teterboro Airport, New Jersey. Surveillance footage and flight logs confirm his arrival on a private jet from Paris. Agents moved quickly. The arrest team blocked the runway while additional units secured nearby perimeters. Once inside his Manhattan residence, investigators conducted a detailed search, documenting rooms, electronic devices, safes, and storage areas. Property searches extended to his Palm Beach estate and private island, cataloging hundreds of items: computers, hard drives, financial records, and personal documents. Every item was photographed, inventoried, and transported to secure evidence facilities. The arrest was executed with minimal public fanfare, though media reports circulated rapidly, highlighting the rare moment a figure like Epstein faced federal detention. Legal filings later revealed details of warrants, property seizure protocols, and preliminary charges: sex trafficking of minors across state lines, conspiracy counts, and financial irregularities. Agents noted the meticulous organization of his estates, designed to conceal movements, clients, and networks, complicating immediate prosecutions. The arrest signaled the end of his untouchable public persona. But the story didn't end with the arrest. The final hours in custody. In August 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City. Official records show a strict schedule of cell checks, meal deliveries, and routine security inspections. Surveillance cameras in parts of the facility reportedly malfunctioned at key moments, prompting internal investigations. Staffing records indicate unusual shift changes and temporary assignments in the unit where Epstein was housed. On the night in question, correctional officers performed standard rounds, but logs later revealed lapses in timing and documentation. Medical personnel responded to initial reports of distress, though the sequence of interventions has remained tightly controlled in official statements. All movements and procedures were recorded in the facility's internal system. Timestamps, checklists, and incident reports became central to subsequent reviews. Multiple federal agencies reviewed the timeline, cross-referencing staffing schedules, security protocols, and video footage. The events of those hours remain under official scrutiny, with investigators focused on ensuring that procedures were followed, identifying procedural lapses, and understanding how the high-profile inmate was managed in custody. And after his death, investigators mapped the network he left behind. The aftermath and unanswered questions. Following Epstein's death, federal and state authorities immediately began reviewing all ongoing investigations. Assets across New York, Florida, and the Caribbean were frozen or seized, including multiple properties, aircraft, and financial accounts. Legal teams for survivors continued pursuing civil and criminal cases using public records, deposition transcripts, and corporate filings to trace his financial networks. International scrutiny intensified, with media outlets and investigative journalists uncovering ties to politicians, businessmen, and global elites. Congressional inquiries examined whether institutions, law enforcement, or intelligence agencies had failed to act over decades. Despite hundreds of documents released and thousands of pages of testimony, key questions remained unresolved. How extensive was his network? Who benefited from his activities? Which allegations remain uninvestigated? New reporting continues to trace the shell companies, offshore accounts, and financial mechanisms that Epstein used to operate in secrecy. The story of Jeffrey Epstein leaves an imprint far beyond his life, a complex intersection of wealth, power, and criminality that remains partially hidden. But who do you think truly profited from the empire Jeffrey Epstein built in the shadows? Let us know down in the comments.